Thank you for coming. This microphone, I don't know if it's the volume, does it sound all right? Is that too high, too low? Good. All right, good, thank you. I'm Mr. Robinson, I'm the guidance director here at the high school. So we have three of our counselors here tonight as well. We have Ms. Delory, we have Mr. Robertson, there he is, and Mr. McKenna. And more importantly, we have a student here. We have Chris Meadows, who is filming this tonight, and that way we can put this onto our website as well. So if you want to see this, replay it, or also if someone couldn't make it tonight, we'll be able to put it on there. We'll also attach and post the slideshow too. So you have to feel like you have to. You can take notes all you want, but know that we'll post this as well. So yeah, so tonight obviously you're here, juniors, families, anybody that's sophomore? No? One? Two? Nice, I like that. All right, so all this information is going to be important no matter what. For juniors and for sophomores, you'll be there before you know it. I have a daughter who's a sophomore, and we're already kind of doing this thing, so you're not too early, it's perfect timing. So tonight, we're going to cover a few different things. First, we're going to start with the overall, the college search process and how you can get that started, because that's kind of step one. And then obviously people want to know what do colleges look at the most. That's always a big question. So we're going to cover some of those things. And then there's a million steps to this whole process, right? So we want to make sure we understand what the responsibility is of the student and also what the counselor's role is. So we're going to cover kind of the both pieces of that. Obviously another big topic is financial aid and scholarship information, so we will go over that piece as well. And then because it can kind of seem, anybody already have older kids in college? So a couple, all right. So if you haven't, it might be a little bit more overwhelming than if you've had gone through it maybe once or twice. It doesn't matter, I guess you have different children, so it could be different feels no matter what, but you'll probably feel like it's overwhelming at first, so we try to break it down. We'll put some simple timelines and some steps to take, so it can kind of, if you follow these timelines, it'll be a lot less stressful. So we'll finish up with that, and then we do have a lot of other resources that we can refer you to, so you can kind of, it can get overwhelming when you're online. You can hit a search for something like this, and then it's like, you go down a rabbit hole, right? So we'll just finish up with a few pieces on that. All right, so we're going to jump in the first piece. We're going to talk about the college search, and Ms. Delory.
All right. Can you hear me? All right. So my name is Meg Delory, and I am one of the 4 guidance counselors here at the high school. I worked in admissions for a little bit before I made the journey into school counseling at the high school level. So talking about college admissions is one of my favorite parts of this job. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I think there will be time for Q&A at the end. But with the college search, so thinking about how do we determine which colleges are the right fit for your students. From our perspective, it's really a twofold process, with one part being that you all and your students have to do the work of getting to know themselves and thinking about their own interests and needs and preferences. And then also doing the research on colleges and the many, many options that are out there. So when you're doing this research on a personal level for your students and also for colleges, it's really important that you're taking notes, because you are going to want to track the information that you're collecting over the course of the next couple of years. And it's easier than you think it will be to forget which details belong to what schools. And so having a written record of that, whether it's something you keep electronically or actually handwritten, is going to be important and valuable. The other piece of advice that I like to give about the college search process is sometimes it's helpful if you and your students decide to assign a kind of rating or ranking system to the schools that you do research on or visit, whether it's a 1 to 10 rating scale or some kind of color system like red, yellow, green, whether you didn't like a school, kind of liked a school, or loved a school, just so that when you're finalizing a list, which we will talk about on the next slide, it's a little bit easier to reflect on. So the things that you want to be evaluating when you're doing your research. You want to look at the quality and rigor of the academics at a school. So you're thinking about the majors that are offered, the type of faculty that are on a campus, the research and work they're doing with undergraduate students, and their academic advising system. You also want to be looking at research, internship, and networking opportunities, because ultimately the end goal, right, is that this college piece is a stop on your student's journey to a career. So having relevant research, internship, and networking opportunities is going to be key. You also want to evaluate the cost of each of these schools and financial aid opportunities. Beyond those pieces, you also want to consider your students' preferences. And you might not know what those preferences are right now, and that's okay. I think we would all advise you to visit at least one school. And we're really lucky because there are many schools within 30 minutes of Wakefield that you could do that initial visit for to start developing preferences. So your students might realize what they like in these following categories. So you're thinking about the setting of a school, whether their campus is an urban, suburban, or rural campus, and also distance from home. The size of a university, how many students there are in the undergraduate population, and also the composition of that student body in terms of the diversity of interests and identities. You want to be looking at study abroad programming, which most schools offer, but also co-curricular opportunities and the types of clubs and activities that students can get involved in. Residential experiences, right? What are the housing experiences and options like for students? What's the food like? Things like that. That will come into mattering for your students. And then also the student social culture. What do students do for fun, and what's the vibe on campus? What's the feel of campus? So don't underestimate your students' gut reaction to any one campus, but also don't let a first impression be the one and only thing that you use for a school. We have a lot of students who on a second or third visit will come to appreciate a school more than they did the first time around. So that is the beginning on the college search process. So the college list. By the fall of your student's senior year, they will hopefully know where they will be applying to school. And that list ultimately will be between 6 to 8 schools, maybe 10. 10 sometimes is a number we toss out there too. And that range is usually responsible because it costs money to apply to each of these schools, right? So anywhere from $50 to $100 just to apply. You don't have to have your students list start at that perfect number. We want our students to cast a wide net and use a variety of resources to start this process, whether it's using a college search engine or even Googling campuses with the best college food. However you need to start the process, you want to cast that wide net and then do your research. Take your visits, watch the virtual tours, contact an admissions counselor, and narrow that list down based on your students' preferences and needs. You also want to balance it with these different categories. 2 from each is ideal, suppose if you are a math person and that's nice and even, but it doesn't have to fit perfectly into those to reach, to target, to safety schools. Sometimes you hear different language around these pieces, but it has to do with the selectivity of the schools. And we don't want for our students to get into every school that they apply to, right? It's healthy to take an appropriate risk and apply to a school that has a selective admissions rate, but we also don't want our students to apply to only highly selective schools and then not have options at the end of the day. So a well-balanced list is important. The reach category, sometimes we refer to it as a stretch category, reach or stretch, is when your students' standardized testing scores and GPA are either at or below the average accepted students' data. And that's information that you can find usually online. If necessary, you can also contact an admissions counselor, or if you're on a tour information session, make sure you have that data written down. Or you can also think about it as the acceptance rate being less than 30%. A target school is where your student fits right into that accepted students data and criteria, and the acceptance rate is 30 to 60%. And then safety or likely schools, sometimes you'll hear that language, is when your student exceeds the average accepted students data or has an acceptance rate higher than 60%. Now, that also kind of operates on a sliding scale. So if your student is a student who has a GPA maybe that's lower than a 3.0, or their SAT scores are hovering in the 1,000 range, their REACH, target, and safety schools might be different from a student who has a 4.5 GPA and nearly perfect SAT scores. So take that with a little bit of a grain of salt and slide your scale based on your students' knowledge of themselves and their application status. Okay. So what are admissions counselors looking for when your student builds their very competitive application? So they are looking to identify students who will excel on their campuses and make a unique and positive impact on those campuses. And they're looking to determine those students based on evidence that your high schoolers can already provide about how they're excelling in high school now, and also what impact they've made on their current communities. They're also able to tell that based on these factors. So they're going to review your students' grades and the rigor of their transcript, which together compose your student's GPA, right? Because we have a weighted GPA that accounts for those honors and AP classes as well as CP classes. They're looking at college entrance exam scores for the most part. Some schools will be test optional, which means your student is not required to submit scores, but we'll talk about that at a later time. It's good to have scores in your back pocket. They are looking at a resume, which is that nice concise list of all of the ways your students spend their time. There's an entire activity section on the college application, which sometimes throws students for a loop and takes them longer to complete because they don't already have some sort of tracking system for what they've been doing in high school. So if you go home tonight and think about things that you can be doing now, tracking the things that your students do with their time outside of school would be a good thing to do, helping them to organize themselves around those lists. Letters of recommendation are evaluated. They are typically just an affirmation of what is already in your student's application, but it's nice to have a teacher who says, yes, this student is also captain of their sports team and a good human who does community service and things like that. The essays, sometimes plural because certain schools might require more than one, but there is a general 650-word essay, which is the college essay, which your students will start to be buzzing about, especially some are going into senior year. And that is an important piece of the application because it is something that captures student voice. It's like their handshake in the application or the opportunity for them to make a genuine first impression. And so that is a really crucial piece of the application process. And then finally, they're also going to consider a variety of different etc. pieces, including demonstrated interest, interviews, and things of that nature. So demonstrated interest is something you can control by connecting with college campuses now in your research process. So registering for a tour instead of just showing up to campus and walking around on your own, or emailing an admissions counselor, or talking with a member of the alumni community and having them write a letter of support to the admissions office. Those pieces that tell them this student from Wakefield is interested in our school in a genuine way and showed us that, more than the student who just applied and we never heard from them or didn't see them tour, right? That might be not a make or break factor, but something that can enhance your student's application and make it as competitive as possible. Okay. So now, I think I turn it over to Mr. Robertson.
All right. Thank you. And so before I go into this section, just kind of celebrating my 20th year here, and kind of starting to feel the emotions that you must be feeling with my oldest just entering high school, just maybe just share just overall some points I have, just some thoughts on the process in general, and then we'll go into the slides on some of the more specifics. But overall, if I had to give you my best advice tonight on, important things to think about, I'd kind of probably tier them under communication, organization, and planning. I think, sometimes, children can be at all different stages. Right now, we have had workshops with all of our junior class and now doing individual meetings. There are students that have been dialed in since their freshman year on this, and students that are just like kind of thinking about, how are we going to start? And those are all okay. If you're here as a parent of a junior tonight, I think, I would strongly encourage you to have a meeting, if you already had, with your child and kind of talk about the dynamics from the financial planning aspect of it to ideas that they have about college, about living away, about things that they're interested in or maybe they're not interested in, and then kind of working towards what you are interested in. Things as Mr. Laurie mentioned, going out, at least starting to visit a bigger school. I remember vividly going onto UMass Amherst campus and feeling like I was overwhelmed, and that was a value-added thing to know that's not for me. A school in the city versus a school in the suburbs, and trying to start to just kind of get a feel of what this process is like, and so strongly recommend coming in to have a meeting with one of us, with your guidance counselor and your child, so we can kind of have that working plan together. I find the best kind of working relationships or the partnerships that I have, that I feel like we're kind of working in concert. I kind of know what you're thinking, and then can kind of give you value add off of that and brainstorm different directions to go. We have given your children, your juniors, kind of a month-by-month things to do. Currently, encouraging them, they're going to be asking teachers for letters of reference, which we'll mention in a minute. They're starting to look at, I started visiting colleges. We'll talk about the college essay in a little bit, but really asking, and encouraging those juniors at those times to have that kind of family meeting. Where's the direction we're going? When are we planning over the summer? When do we have time to maybe to do those visits? Because I think it's important to plan on it. And then how we kind of then go forward and work together and help you, so that we're kind of setting your child up kind of month by month, so they're don't hit that inevitable next fall, like, oh my God, what am I going to do? So both things that I find important. One thing that I've been passionate about, unfortunately, COVID has taken a step back, is job shadowing, and we're returning to a more robust program here, but encouraging your children to ask a lot of questions and be curious about different careers. As Mr. Laurie said, college is setting them up for a future life, and and please come, utilize. Like I say, for me, I'd say for any student, for job shadowing, I've built up a good network, and so as my colleagues. We do allow an excused absence for that. I think there's a real power in going out and visiting and talking and thinking of the things you potentially might want to do. We don't try to make this like this pressure-consuming thing that you have to know exactly what you want to be. I majored in accounting, and I'm here, as your one of your potentially your child's guidance counselor. But we kind of thinking about in general ways, skill sets that what your children are interested in, passionate about, where their talents lie. What things they know they just don't want to be to do, and those are all good things to think about, talk about, research over the next year, while they're involved in this process. And things like we also encourage that there's no one perfect school out there. I know this process is inherently stressful. There's a lot of things that you can't control. We're just going through now getting decisions for our seniors, and the inevitable, geez, I didn't get into my top choice of college, and I think the beauty of our students, many beauties of our students at Wake Memorial High School, and the realization is they kind of like a plotter with the breadth of schools and realize, I can probably be happy at one of several different schools here. So the more kind of the research you do, and you realize that there's a lot of places where you're going to be able to find success. I just encourage you, the more kind of communication, kind of planning, organizing your time that you do, the more likely that you're going to feel good about the end result. So with that preamble, I'm going to start into the slides that I'm in charge of. This is a little more specific to, next year, just informational when your children, apply to college. And the last kind of point I'll say informational is that something I'm very passionate about, and my colleagues are, and just know that we don't define college. I know most people will be looking at a 4 and 2 year college. More and more students are looking seriously at trades, at military service, and other things, and that's college too. That's preparing for your future. So if your child is on the fence, we want to get in and have those conversations right away as well. I'm currently planning like a trade kind of shadow day in a couple of weeks. It's important, just know that we look at all these options as we kind of prepare students for life after high school. But in regards to college decisions next year when they end up applying, students will either be applying early decision, early action, regular decision, or rolling admissions. Let me walk you through that. Early decision is a binding decision. Probably be about 5% of our students look at that. I think as a rule of thumb, I would encourage early decision for a student, that's looking at a high, top tier college that maybe by the numbers, they might statistically be a reach. Colleges do pay attention to these U.S. News reports. You probably saw that the high school report came out the other day of the high schools, and colleges have their own metrics, and one thing they do look at is their yield, how many students apply versus accepted. So early decision, 100% of those students go there, so there's a slightly higher percentage of students that get in early decision. It's not going to totally change the game, but for a student that just is no, they really want to go to BU, they know that money is not going to be the make or break factor because you are kind of bound to go there, for better or worse. And then maybe you're just thinking there's right on the cusp. That's where early decision we look at as a potential good option. Where early action, which is something that a majority of our students utilize as a college application preference, is a process where if a student applies by a date, say as November 1st, they'll hear back by the middle of December, early January, some say a date, but they are not bound to go there. They can still then decide that they want to go to a different school. Colleges, I think, are, like this option because it helps them push their reading, up, into October, November. But when we were going through the process of we as a parent of high school student, I think a lot of our applications were all just due January 1st. Everything was at the same time, but I think now in this time, we see a lot of our students applying by, say, November 1st, November 15th, which is great. This is why we're here now to say this is the time to get out and visit and start doing some of the mechanics of thinking, other things we're going to talk about. So by next September 1st, we're really hitting the ground running, finalizing our list and looking at applying to schools. So early action is something that is popular with our students. But we also have many students, that decide and apply to schools regular decision. Usually those deadlines are sometime from January 1st on to schools. And some of the highly selective schools kind of have just announced all of their decisions or just announced them at the end of March. Other schools kind of do it more like a rolling admissions, which is another regular decision where kind of first in, first out. Kids will trickle in and apply to Salem State. Salem always has a free application before October 31st, and some kids start hearing as early as end of October, early November. So, it's always nice to get that first decision under your belt to know, okay, I think I'm going somewhere. So, a couple of the admissions options that we have, students have in their application process. And please, go to the next slide. Questions are so important. At the end, we'll do a Q&A. Something you have, please ask, and also please introduce yourself before you leave if we haven't met. And we're your counselor. It's good to have kind of that face-to-face relationship. All right, moving on to the application process. These are some that we just did a post-secondary planning workshop with the junior class in March, and things we kind of discussed. One, creating a common application account. A good majority of schools your children will be looking at will be members of the common application. It has streamlined the process, and it made it a lot easier. So instead of having to fill out your name and all that biographical data, 7, 8 times how many schools you're applying to, you just do it once, and that can go through each school. Schools will have some supplemental information to fill out. some of the more high school schools might have supplemental essays, different essays to fill out, but the common application is intact. A nice thing they did about 2 or 3 years ago was they said that every year the Common App, as of August 1st, refreshes and they update certain parts of it, but really about 95% of it stays the same. So as of 3 or 4 years ago, now if you create an account tonight, your son or daughter, that account goes through. So I run a college application essay class with Mr. Laurie and 2 colleagues in the English department, which I'll mention, and some of your children are already enrolled, and I'll publicize in a minute. But we have the students there, or I encourage my students even in the spring to create their Common App account. They connect it with Naviance as they're asking teachers to write letters, and then they can start kind of going through that slowly over the summer, and then have most of that ideally filled out before you return in September. Take that kind of off of your plate. But so we're doing that. We're starting that process of helping students do that right now. I just mentioned as part of it, kind of linking our Common App and Naviance accounts. Naviance is the portal that we use to electronically transmit transcripts and recommendations. We sync those accounts, and the easy process to do that. Then teachers kind of upload their recommendations, and it gets everything in sync. So as part of, as I said also just at the start, asking teachers for letters of recommendation. It's a process where you're talking with our students now, kind of as a rule of thumb. It doesn't have to be the student the teacher that you had the highest grade in, someone that feels like knows you well. And definitely encouraging our students now to start asking, especially those kind of really focused students that are like looking and thinking about things. Some teachers do have, and understandably have, quotas of like, I can only write 25 letters each year, and teachers are doing this above and beyond in their nights and weekends and summers. But really kind of putting some thought into it, and like teachers, and then, as a rule of thumb, if you're really thinking specifically about a math, science area or a certain area, asking a teacher in that area of subject area. So something that we're doing now, and just the good life skills, the process of asking somebody formally, asking them what additional information they would need and want, and working with students to fill out an activity sheet so that the teacher not only talks about Jenna Carroll as being a wonderful student, former student right there, I don't love you here with your brother, but also what she did outside extracurricularly in the classroom. And just on extracurriculars, it's just kind of just nuggets I just want to kind of sprinkle in. I know that sometimes there's this push to involve yourself in a million activities. I think we found in talking with college admissions officers, and I think my colleagues would agree, as a good rule of thumb, is do a few things and be passionate about them, do them well, and get in deep and try to take on some leadership roles or do something. You don't have to be involved in 25 activities. Pick 2 or 3 and really kind of see what kind of impact you can make within those. Completing the college essay, that's something that is probably one of the more time-consuming parts of the process. The essay prompts for next year's Common Application are already out, so you could go on and check those out now. And as stated, I think Mr. McKenna will also mention it, we do run a college essay course here the week of July 11th, where you can get your essay done in a week, reviewed. So if you're interested in that, you can see me afterwards. I can give you those details. Your juniors should have the details on them. But there's also other opportunities. We're here to help out, as in, if they have ideas and support. Those are one of the many things we do and work with students on helping enhance and support their essays, through our counselor appointments. But I think it's a good thing to start thinking about and looking at those topics and thinking about, okay, how are some things that are kind of unique to your, to me as a student, to your child, that can kind of bring out in that essay. Standardized testing requirements. Not that there's any silver linings really, of what we've just gone through as this pandemic, but one thing I do like that colleges have considered really kind of, more stringently why they need standardized test scores. More schools are becoming test optional. You'll find, you can see a robust list on fairtest.org, a website they have, like the schools that are test optional, and also see on their websites. But as Mr. Laurie said, I would recommend the students looking to take it once. There is a chance that you could submit those scores if your scores are above the school's kind of, median scores, so that it might be advantageous to do that. It might be advantageous for scholarships they might be offering. I encourage, as a rule of thumb, students to take the SAT and the ACT at least once. The SAT, remember, is your kind of your standardized and a more intelligence-based test, been around forever. ACT is more popular in the Midwest. It's really kind of come out, but a little bit more academic. Say intelligence versus just natural. A little more like an intelligence or MCAS, so science portion of the ACT is a little more holistic. So some students can potentially do better than one test than the other. But then we try to de-emphasize them. We do have testing, there's test prep services, available. I think that, I just encourage the students, there's also a lot of free resources, Khan Academy on the College Board website to look at and just familiarize themselves with what how the test format, it goes, and take it once, see how you do, and then see what you want to do for continued additional preparation. So we offer it here at Wakefield High School in May, as well as next October, and many neighboring communities offer the SATs in June and next August as well, and then next November. So there's several times. So we'll take it for the sophomores out here in the audience. We'd encourage all rising juniors to take the PSAT next October, as well as good preparation for the SAT. It also could potentially make you eligible for a National Merit Scholarship, depending on your school. Adding schools to the I'm applying to in Naviance as we use, students use Naviance more, deeply as we move through to junior to senior year, as they know that I have identified that I am going to apply to Boston University and Salem State and UConn. Kind of add those lists. We also think about the timing of when they're going to want to apply. Either they have an early action deadline or regular decision. Where it comes into the organization part, I mentioned at the beginning of kind of a key tenet of this process. And I'm a big fan of kind of the Excel spreadsheet of putting it down. Here are the schools I'm definitely going to apply to. Here's the deadline I like to apply by. Here's if they require the SATs or not. Here's if they have additional essays they require or not. Here's any additional information that I want to potentially add, and kind of use that as your basis to then go and go out and kind of pace yourself with your planning. So submitting a transcript request form next year, we don't, we still kind of use a pen paper form, because we want to make sure we don't miss something. Like there's not an electronic, if the students can apply, we have meetings with all seniors in the third week of September, and then we set up individual meetings so we can officially declare I'm going to be applying to schools X, Y, and Z. And then we ensure that, work with the student, make sure that they have everything correct in Naviance, that they're ready to go. Then meet with them again before they apply to make sure all I's are dotted and T's are crossed, to ensure we just kind of that communication that if you're going to apply somewhere, we want to make sure that you officially alerted us so that we don't miss anything and nothing kind of falls short. And the beautiful thing about Naviance is students have a portal where they can look and see that the applications that they have, the schools they're applying to, that the transcript has been submitted and the recommendations have been submitted, so they can have that transparency to know that is, indeed has been taken care of. All right, responsibilities of the guidance counselor. Things that we'll be doing in the process, we'll be writing each of your children a letter of recommendation, something that we are collecting data now and just thinking of how we can put your child in the best light. With that being said, if you have a parent bragging of something, my kid, I don't know if they're going to say, but I know, feel free to reach out, let us know. We're here to put them in their best light for school. We also, with that recommendation, complete a secondary counselor form that talks a little about their attributes. We're the kind of the clearinghouse where we compile their letters of recommendation and transcripts, put those together, and we then with them kind of press the send button, or we press the send button and send those out. There's time to, and that's, submitting all school materials up to colleges. And just, the availability as a resource throughout the process, kind of end where I started, like that meeting, that coming together, kind of talking things out, like, use us as any type of resource in as you can. Some of you, I know, are probably very knowledgeable of this process. Some of you, this is very, very new. Whatever you are, just utilize us. That's our job. I mean, as Mr. Laurie said, this is something I think at ECHO we all feel passionate about. This kind of taking the next step is something we hope we can add a lot of value. We know a lot of your children have been very self-sufficient in the freshman, sophomore year, and hopefully this is a process we can work together with, and ensure that they have, at least it felt like they've been able to explore all opportunities, before applying. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Mr. McKenna. As I said at the end, please introduce yourself if I haven't met you before, and if you are interested in the college essay class, you can see me before me. Here's Mr. McKenna.
Thank you very much. So I get to talk about the money aspect of college, the good part, the one we all write the check for. But so financial aid is really, really important for everybody. And so I think the most important thing that everybody can do is, if you go to the FAFSA website, they have something called the forecaster. So you can put in your income for last year and this year and get a fairly predictable expected family contribution. Okay? And that is really, really important because you're going to find out that the federal government thinks that we can afford a lot more than what we should be able to afford. So, and once you see the number, then you can have a discussion with your student about what it is that we can and cannot do as a family. Some families have unlimited resources, most don't. So it's really important to know what the starting number is. So the FAFSA website is where you will go in the senior year, and you will fill out the FAFSA form, and that will give you the expected family contribution. The CSS profile is an institutional financial aid tool. And what that is run by the college board, and it's very, very detailed. I have two daughters that went through college. Both of them went to schools that I had to fill out the CSS profile. It literally takes about an hour and a half to fill out the form with 2 years of tax returns. There's a lot of data entry. You're always missing a document, so you have to go get something. But the good news is that they're not trying to find anything. They have institutional money that is given to them, and then they invest that. They have an endowment. They have to give away by law 7% of their income from their endowment. So if a student goes to Harvard and their family is very well off, they usually receive some financial aid. So these schools that have alumni that donate a lot of money and it goes to the endowment, they're looking for families that have more need. So that's why they have this additional financial aid for. You will receive the federal financial aid, but on top of that, you may receive some institutional financial aid from the institution themselves, and that's their money. And it does not have, it's not a loan, it's a scholarship, and it's given to you, and it doesn't have to be paid back. Scholarships. Scholarships are things that you should start looking for now, and I know it's very early, but the reason I say that is because you have to find scholarships that your son or daughter is actually going to qualify for, and that is a very tedious process. There are a lot of scholarships out there, but there are a lot of qualifying criteria. Your son or daughter may qualify for 2, but there may be 4, and they will not be able, if you can fill out the scholarship, but they won't be able to receive it. The most important scholarship that any Wakefield resident that should fill out is the Scholarship Foundation of Wakefield. They give away about $300,000 every year to Wakefield residents. Now that includes students who have gone to St. John's Prep, Malden Catholic, but anyone that lives in Wakefield is eligible if they fill out the application. That application is online and available January 1st. The deadline is March 31st. And you do not have to, there are, I think, 5 scholarships within the Scholarship Foundation that you need to actually apply for. All the rest of the scholarships are smaller, and the Scholarship Foundation will actually put your son or daughter in for those scholarships. And if they qualify, and your family qualifies, they may receive a scholarship. And MIFA is a great resource. It's online, and they have, I have 4 here. They have a FAFSA festival, so anybody who feels uncomfortable filling out the FAFSA, they have a few dates that are 4 hours long. They've been doing them virtually. They'll have a breakout room where they'll have like a financial tax person, accountant, planner that will help you actually fill out the FAFSA. They also have college financing seminars that are 2 hours usually, loan cost estimator, and saving for college. If you go onto their website and you go to the events tab, which is up at the top, the link, you can find these. They run these basically through the school year. They may run a couple over the summertime, but they're basically run during the school year. But they're at convenient times, and with Zoom, they have been running them online, so that's a very convenient factor as well. If we go to the next page. So this spring of the junior year, we've already done some of this with your sons and daughters. We've started researching colleges. The SAT and ACT, Mr. Robertson covered. If your son or daughter hasn't signed up for the May SAT, the June SAT is being run in Melrose and Stoneham, and the deadline, I believe, is May 7th, so they still have time to sign up for that. We do recommend, as Mr. Laurie and Mr. Robertson said, that it's really good for the students to take the SATs. The state universities don't require SATs unless your son or daughter has a GPA under 3.0. And then they must submit the SAT scores. The 2 academic teacher recommendations, you want to make sure that your son or daughter actually lets the teacher know what their deadline is. Sometimes if there's an input error on Naviance, they put it in for regular decision and they meant to put it in for early action. The early action deadline is November 1st and the regular decision deadline is February 1st. The teachers that are doing multiple essays, recommendations, will put their recommendations in order of timeliness. So if it's a February 1st deadline, it goes to the back of the pile. And if your son or daughter hasn't alerted them to the deadline, they may not get it in time. So make sure that your son or daughter alerts their teachers to their deadlines. Extremely important. The teachers go on to Naviance, and so they have access to Naviance, and they use Naviance, they know how to use Naviance. And so if the student hasn't told them, they go by the date that's on Naviance. But if they've written them an email and spoken to them, or speak to them and then follow up with an email, that's a great way to ensure that everything will be done timely. Planning college visits. Most of the colleges are open now. Going to the college is so important to be able to walk around campus, and it's really, really important that you and your son or daughter ask questions of the student doing the tour. You're going to get more truthful answers from the student than you will from the admissions person. The admissions person is there to sell the school. They may have gone to the school, but if there are any drawbacks or challenges, they're not going to highlight those. If a student has had a drawback or a challenge, they'll be readily available and ready to tell you what it's been. And you can just ask them, have you had any challenges? And I'm sure they'll answer you truthfully. It's a great way to get some really good information. Course selection we already done. We can change the course selection. We do not recommend, even though it's important to the schools, we do not recommend that students take AP courses because it looks good. We recommend that students take AP and honors classes because they have the ability to do the work. It doesn't do a student any good to take an AP or an honors class and get a D when they could have taken a class, honors or a CP class, and gotten a B or an A. That looks much better on a transcript. The other piece, which I explain to my students, is that if you choose a class that's a higher level and you don't do well, then that also puts you in a troublesome spot with the admissions person because you've misjudged your ability. So you don't want to put yourself in that situation, as I tell the students. Creating a Common App account, that's very, very easy. We recommend that your students use the same email address, and it's a personal email address that they've used for Naviance. That way their username is the same, and I recommend that they use the same password. And if they do that, then it's easy for everybody to access, and they should share those with you. Next slide, working on the Common App. And these are all things that can be done over the summer. I would recommend 30 to 45 minutes a week. If your son or daughter works on this, they will be done pretty much with everything that has to do with the college process, except for the stress, but all of the work. So now they can come into school in September and focus on the schoolwork. Every student has to submit first term grades. If you're going regular decision, you're going to have to submit second term grades. Put yourself in a position where everything is out of the way and you can focus on what you need to focus on. Not all schools are Common App schools. Endicott to local schools, Endicott College, you have to go directly to the website and apply on their website. Salem State University is not a Common App school. And believe it or not, MIT is not a Common App school. It's the highest technological school in the country, and they don't have Common App. They do have an electronic application on their website, but they don't do Common App. Mr. Robinson talked about organization. Having a spreadsheet, knowing what the deadlines are, is extremely important for everybody involved in the process. Gentle reminders of the upcoming deadline, or a nice nudge to get the work done, because we need to know when those deadlines are, because if we miss those deadlines, if it's early action, then we move to regular decision. If it's regular decision, then we may not actually be considered a candidate for the school. Writing the first draft of the essay. The one thing I want to just talk about the essay is that Mr. Laurie said it's a 650-word essay. The challenge is that that's, for many students, that's very difficult to write in a concise manner. They have to write about a challenging situation. So the way I explain it is, just think of it as 600 words. You want to spend 150 or 25% of the essay writing about what the challenge was, and 75% or 450 on how that affected you, what you learned, and how you've changed. Students get wrapped up in trying to put all the details down about the challenge, and they leave themselves 100 to 150 words to explain how it affected me. And the admissions rep just doesn't get the gist of what we're trying to say. The other thing, it's not on the list, but Some of the juniors won't know what they want to do. They may have an idea. There are a lot of free resources out there online. Coursera, edX, FutureLearn. There are also about 500 colleges that have free courses that they're offering to anybody. And you can go, like if your student thinks they're interested in coding and they haven't done it before, Coursera has courses that you can get a certificate. You can actually get college credit if you want to pay the college for the credits, but you can take these courses for free. So if there's something that your son or daughter is interested in, but they're not sure, these are great ways to get some exposure, and then going into senior year, they can really solidify a major, because now we can talk about, okay, how does this turn into a major? What occupation does this relate to? And it makes it a lot easier for the students. Staying organized is probably the most important thing. We will be tracking down the students, but Naviance helps us to be able to, and we get alerts from Naviance about transcript requests. When a student puts anything into Naviance, we get updates, so we're able to do that. Continued research, Mr. Laurie and Mr. Robertson talked about this, but every school has a Facebook page. It's a great way to get information, and different departments may have Facebook pages. So if your son or daughter is interested in a particular major and they want to get more information, contact the school through the Facebook page. That's demonstrated interest. They may have an Instagram page also, but there are multiple ways that your son or daughter can contact the school, doing a tour. They also have open houses, and many of the schools will allow students to shadow a student. You have to call the admissions. They'll set that up, and you'll be able to go for a day. That would be an excused absence for the student. They just have to get a note from the admissions department, so they can actually attend classes and walk around the campus and see what a day is like for a student. Especially for those, you know, we have a number one choice for that. As Mr. Robinson talked about, we're going to match up the Common App account and the Naviance account. If that isn't done, then we cannot send electronic documents to the schools. And we will do that with your sons and daughters, matching up the two accounts. We've done it with some of our students. We're meeting with a whole bunch more between now and the end of the year. And anybody that hasn't still done that, will do that in the fall. Submitting transcript request forms, Mr. Robinson mentioned this. We do it. We have a paper form that the students come in, and there are enough lines here for like 6 or 8 schools. They fill this out, they put the deadline on here. The teachers that they're having write their recommendations. And this is just basically the way we track things before we go online. And so the student will actually come in the office, fill this out, and then drop it off, and then that starts the process. Mr. Robinson will enter in the transcript into Naviance, and then we then look for the recommendations from the teacher. Once their file is complete, we send everything to the schools. If they're early action, we don't have to send a second round of transcripts. If they get accepted, then we have to send the final transcript to whoever your son or daughter decides to go. If they go regular decision, we do have to send out our second term grades, and we track that through the Naviance system. We have waivers for SATs and also for college applications if your family qualifies. If there's an unfortunate event where a parent gets laid off from a job, or if your family qualifies for subsidies, you may be eligible for a waiver for SATs and for college applications. If that's the case, have your son or daughter talk to their guidance counselor privately, and then we will fill out the forms. and get that for them. And there are waiver codes that we have for the SATs. One other thing I forgot to mention is that when you're contacting the school, Mr. Laurie did mention this, but the Facebook page, you know, really make sure that experiential learning is so important today. And many schools have internships, but some of their programs are not as extensive. So you really, your son or daughter should really find out about how extensive the internship program is. Schools that have really good internships that we've had a lot of luck with, everybody knows Northeastern, but Wentworth is right next door to Northeastern. We've had multiple students go. They went through the internship program there. They had a job before they graduated. We've actually had students be offered jobs to quit school. They would pay for night school if they would come work for them full time. So that internship program is really, really important for the students because it will lead, if it doesn't lead to a job, it leads to probably a great recommendation. And if it's in the field, they may know somebody that's looking for someone, and that could be a great way for them to get started.
Well, that's it, yeah. All right. Couple of quick things. We're aiming to get around 8 o'clock, so we're kind of on schedule here. So just a couple of quick points to finish up. So one last piece as far as things we do here. Google Classroom, you've probably heard of it with your children and all their classes. So English, Math, History has their own Google Classroom. That's where all their information is. The guidance department, a year or two ago, I think, we created Google Classroom for their guidance counselor. So when they go on their screen, you probably see little squares, a little square for each class on there when they log on. Now they'll have one that has their guidance counselor's classroom. All right, so we ask students basically, how can we get reached out to you? Did you even look at our website? Do you respond to our emails? Like what, if you were us, what would we do? And we gave them all different choices of reaching out to a student, and this was overwhelmingly the highest choices. We're on there every day. It's like another class. We can easily click on it. And the good thing about this is that we're able to design it so that it's very concise with forms that they need. If it's directions on how to do all of the steps we just talked about, they can just click on that. You have access. You don't have your own like classroom, but you can always just obviously jump on your child if you want to kind of see what's going on there. But there's a ton of information that we can get out to the students this way, and it seems to be really working in the last year or so. So just want to make sure you realize, you know, bring that up and see if they aren't aware of it, make sure that they are. Pretty sure they are. So I know we've given a ton of information and an amazing amount of information tonight. I just want to go over a couple of dates just to kind of recap. So for the next couple of months, the deadline to register for the June 4th SAT, we mentioned, is May 5th. So you have not missed the deadline if you want to take the June SAT. May 7th, hopefully if you want to take the May, I sent out an email, I'm not sure everybody got it, but there was a deadline over vacation to register for the May SAT. So if you did do that, then you'll be taking the May 7th here at the high school. The financial aid MIFA, again, that MIFA site's really, really helpful. They have a ton of resources, and if you don't even get their live events, you can go to their website and click on past webinars, whenever you have the time. But basically, they do have a live one May 9th. It's a whole financial aid webinar. They're really, really helpful in that area. Let's see, June 4th, we talked about the SAT. It's not at Wakefield, but in a couple of neighboring communities. This summer, we've talked about the essay workshop. That was the week of July 11th. And that August 1st, again, start the Common App accounts now, but when it officially rolls over, that's the August 1st date. Just a couple other quick dates. We've talked about that if you are doing early action, you'll start to get that deadline in your head. It's November 1st, November 15th-ish if you're doing the early action. And then if you're doing a regular decision, it's still like that January 1st, January 15th target. College Board has not announced their official SAT dates for next year, but they've made it very clear on their website that they anticipate these days. I would be shocked if they don't change, if they change it at this point. But so there's one on August 27th, October 1st, and November 5th, just to kind of keep that on your radar. So we've gone over a ton of information. I know just listening to it every time, it's like I feel like you add something new every time, so I'm constantly learning. And every time they're saying these things, I'm like, good point, so I'm glad we're covering every this. Where to go next? Check out our website. We do have a website with a lot of information. Go to your students, ask them to jump on that Google Classroom because that's huge. We have the Naviance account. That's the kind of the one-stop shop where students can do college searches, career searches, interest surveys, everything like that, as well as the college application steps. And then we have just a number. There's so many websites out there, but we just put a few on here that we would recommend that you check out. Again, we'll share this whole thing out, so if you didn't take notes, don't worry, we're going to be recording it, so you can always refer back to this information. So now that we've completely probably overwhelmed you, just want to kind of leave with one thought to kind of grasp the situation here. And this is a quote that I kind of like. It says, research demonstrates that the ultimate success in life will be determined by a child and not by the institution from which he or she receives a diploma. And I really believe that, and so as much as we're going through all this process and it's stressful and oh, it has to be the perfect school, it's what you make of it, and it sounds cliche, but it's so true. So realize that there may be a million colleges out there, but you know, wherever they're going to land up, they'll be all right, and it's what they do with it themselves, no matter what school it is. So that was just kind of a parting thought after flooding you with all this information. So if you have any questions, we can ask those now. If not, you can come up and talk to the counselors, whatever you want. But I want to thank you so much again. I know everything's competing for people's time and stuff these days, so I really appreciate you taking the time out tonight to come see us, and I hope that this was helpful for you.